everybody, this is Eric Warren. Welcome to NetworkMarketingPro.com. I learned some sad news today. I learned that my good friend and mentor, Mr. Jim Rohn, passed away in the early hours of Saturday, December 5th, 2009. And it's such an unbelievable loss, not only for the world, but for me personally. Jim is such a good friend, and he's been ill for about a year, fairly seriously ill. And when I first learned about it, I wrote a tribute because in the hopes that he would read it, you know what I mean? Because I didn't want to necessarily write a eulogy, but more than anything else, it's to be accurate about my feelings. It's almost like a love letter. And today I want to share what I wrote to you, with all of you. Just kind of let you know the impact of a human being, the impact of what a person can do, the impact of what you can do in this world. And I was first introduced to the work of Mr. Jim Rohn 20 years ago, a little bit more than 20 years ago. I was 24 years old, struggling in network marketing, doing my best to wreck everything around me. Somehow I came upon a bootleg audio cassette of a talk he gave at a Shackley convention entitled The Seed and the Sower. And using the biblical parable of the sower, he talked about how to apply personal development and the law of averages to your network marketing career. And I'll bet I listened to it 100 times, literally over and over and over and over. And I made copies for everybody in my group, and I passed it around and gave it to friends. And from there I purchased a 6-audio cassette series called The Challenge to Succeed, and it literally changed my life. And it sounds over dramatic, I know, but it's true. He told about his early life, how he messed everything up until about age 25, how he met a mentor and began to turn his life around. And as I listened to it, I thought, hey, I've messed up my life so far. If he turned his life around, then maybe I can too. And not only did he provide an example of what was possible, he gave me a roadmap to begin the process. And he taught me the skill of personal development, and he gave me hope. In addition, he gave me tools to build my business. It wasn't just talk. His words were magical, and I found that if I used his words to my prospects or with my team, using his words, the response was phenomenally positive. In the early days, I thought, if I can just use his words and get these results, I've just found an unbelievable shortcut to financial success in this industry. Some of the other hundreds of lessons, literally, I learned from Mr. Rohn include the magical power of discipline, the art of personal development, setting compelling goals, the power of a good idea, one single good idea that can totally turn your life upside down, the driving force of motivation, the qualities of skillful leadership, the keys to powerful communication, the dynamics of change and growth, refining your philosophy of life, and so much more. One of the biggest was what he called the laws of association. I've talked about it on earlier shows. The laws of association, how you'll become the average of the 5 people you spend the most time with. And if you didn't like your life at the moment, you could begin to change it immediately by just changing the 5 for the better. Well, I began that process, and it started by making Jim Rohn one of my 5. He didn't know it at the time. But you know how I did that when we'd never even met? I did it by buying everything he ever produced and listening to it constantly in my car. I'll bet I've listened to his materials 1,000 hours of my life. With a heavy emphasis when I was first trying to make a name for myself in the industry. And by listening to him so much, he became a stronger influence on my business than any other person. We've all heard about The Secret, big bestseller, The Secret, and the law of attraction. Mr. Rohn would agree with parts of it, and he'd disagree with others. He'd correctly inform you that visualizing a Lamborghini showing up in your driveway without going out and doing something to make it happen is crazy, or in his unique words, affirmation without discipline is the beginning of delusion. But he would also agree it's possible to attract success by becoming a more attractive person. And if you become valuable in the marketplace, exciting things can happen for you. Well, I began that process of personal development, expanding my positive associations, trying to bring value to the marketplace, working on following the roadmap that he provided. And you know what? I was privileged enough to meet Jim Rohn in person, to work with him, and eventually to become friends. In the early 1990s, I was a distributor and eventually the president of a network marketing company called Quorum International. One of the things most important to the management of that company was figuring out a way to communicate with our distributors. Stuart Johnson of Video Plus, another very important person in the network marketing industry, came up with a solution. We would sell our distributors a satellite dish, a KU band satellite dish and receiver for anywhere from $300 to $500, purchase some satellite time, and broadcast a weekly communication show to the whole company. And it was very successful. And this is before the days of the flip cam for a few $100s and the internet. I mean, we had to buy satellite time for a couple $100,000 a month. People had to buy these dishes in order to be able to get it. It was a completely different era. But it was wildly successful. In a few short months, we sold something like 50,000 dishes to our people, and everyone was on the same page. Our communication was on the same page. It was amazing. And then a light bulb went off. If we have this airtime anyway, why don't we introduce the concept of personal development to our people? And it really, really worked. After corporate announcements, our distributors could watch some of the best in the world. Who better than Mr. Jim Rohn to be the first? The response was unbelievable. Many people had never heard of personal development, let alone have it piped into their living rooms. And in June of 1994, the CEO of Quorum and myself ended up leaving that company for some ethical reasons, and I've talked about that on previous shows, and spent some of the time thinking about what we wanted to do with our lives. Because of the combination of our satellite experience and the fact that personal development has been so important to both of us, we decided to start a company by combining both. The company was TPN, the People's Network. The TPN experience for me was one of the most satisfying times of my life, and I have to say it wouldn't have happened if not for Jim Rohn. In those early days, he bet on us when most people wouldn't. And his involvement encouraged other people to join it. People like Brian Tracy and Les Brown and Dennis Waitley and Paul Zane Pilzer and Jeffrey Gittimer and way too many others to count. And it was during that time that I got to know Mr. Rohn personally. When we held some of our early events, he would speak and the crowds would go crazy. And I remember one of the first productions we ever did in our studio, our little studio. I'm acting as producer, not knowing anything about about production. And he did in our studio the challenge to succeed. And I just couldn't believe 6 or 7 years earlier, I first started listening to him in my car. I was actually helping to produce a new television series with him. A few weeks earlier, we'd heard that James Brown, you might know him from hosting the Sunday morning football shows. He was earlier on Fox and then on CBS. But James Brown was a fan, so we called and asked him if he'd do some in and out intros and closing segments for Jim Rohn's show. And he agreed to do that on short notice, and we were set to go. And I haven't seen those shows in quite a while. I believe they're Stuart Johnson now owns them, so maybe they'll find their way into people's lives through Success Magazine or some other form. But I have to tell you, just being there as we produced that show is something I'll cherish for the rest of my life. To talk to Jim Rohn during the breaks, to laugh and to joke with him, to listen to him tell stories in the dressing room, all those things are priceless to me. We went on to produce many more hours of his material, and while the studio productions were great, nothing was better than Jim Rohn live. Several times we hosted weekend TPN events where there was nothing but Jim Rohn doing what he called his weekend seminar. Thousands of people in attendance soaking up all of his wisdom, and at the same time we were capturing it for future generations. So why am I telling you all this? Here's a question for each of you. How do you measure a life? I think it's a common theme in the human experience that the fact that we all want our lives to have meaning. In spite of our pursuit of success and happiness, I think we all strive for significance. And I think people wonder how much of a difference they can make. What can one person do anyway? Many times people stop trying because they can't see how they could possibly matter in the scheme of things. Mr. Rohn talks about the power of showing up in someone else's testimonial. the meaning in being a positive influence in someone's life. I think that's true for family, for friends, for coworkers, and for people you've never even met. When Jim Rohn entered this world, it was like a big stone being dropped into the water with tiny ripples growing out from the center. And as he began to tell his story, and thank God he did, the ripples grew. As he traveled the world to share it with others, they grew even larger. As he continued to refine his skills and put his work into audio, video, and print form, they grew larger still. Because imagine if he didn't do it in audio or video or print form. He just did it in talks. We wouldn't have what we have today. And when people listened, people like me, hopefully people like you, more stones were dropped into the water, and life created life. Mr. Rohn personally helped tens of thousands through his live seminars, and tens of thousands of stones were dropped in. That's why I can say without question or hesitation that there are literally millions of people around the world who, know it or not, owe a huge debt of gratitude to Mr. Rohn for the principles that are helping them in their lives every single day. And most of those people have no idea. It was a farm boy from Idaho who became the most quoted person in personal development history, and whose legacy gave them that gift. Some people, including Mr. Rohn, would say he doesn't deserve the credit, that he's just passing on ancient truth. And while I understand what they're saying, I don't believe that to be completely true. While he did pass on ancient truth, it still took a person willing to be used. While the information was incredible, it still took his discipline in finding a way to pass it on so we could understand it. It reminds me of a story Mr. Rohn would tell. He said a man was driving one day and he saw a rock garden by the side of the road. He stopped to take a look, and as luck would have it, the gardener happened to be there and offered him a tour. As they walked through the gardener pointed out some of the highlights. He told the man that his first step was to clear the area so the garden could be organized. The man replied, "Praise God, all glory be to God." They went on, and the gardener showed the man how he made pathways through the garden with small stones on the walkway and larger stones to line the sides, to which the man replied, "All men are nothing, all glory be to God." They walked on, and the gardener showed the man how he'd organized the garden into beautiful designs with scenic sitting areas throughout, and again the man replied, "To God be the glory." To that, the gardener finally replied, "Look, mister, I understand what you're saying, but you should have seen this place when God had it all to himself. The world is a better place because of Mr. Rohn. And if they did an It's a Wonderful Life test to measure the impact on mankind if he'd never been born, the results would be astounding. What a legacy. Now it's up to us to continue the legacy. I wrote earlier about the power of showing up in someone else's testimonial. Well, Jim Rohn is a permanent part of mine. I'll never be able to fill the void now that he's left us, but I'll never stop trying. I'll do my best to keep his legacy alive, and I hope all of you do too. In 1997, Mr. Rohn came out with a book called Leading an Inspired Life. I asked him to sign it for me, and this is what he wrote. He said, "Eric, thanks for the friendship all of these years. Friendship is wealth. You make me a rich man. It's one of my most prized possessions. I've seen Jim from time to time over the last years. The last was when he attended a personal development event for me here in 2004 in my hometown of Minneapolis. He was as fantastic as ever. In our society today, there's a common question. Where are our heroes? Where are the people leading the way for the future? Mr. Jim Rohn is and was a legitimate hero. And through his work and his influence, he'll live forever. We'd all be blessed if we could do the same. I know this is a horribly inadequate tribute to an amazing man, but Mr. Jim Rohn, I love you very much. Ladies and gentlemen, I'll see you tomorrow. Bye-bye.